Hello everyone, David Lang here with another fireside chat. Hope you're all doing okay. Well, before I start, I just have to say I'm a little bit worried today that we might be video bombed. Not by my friends, although that actually could happen, and that's been happening in the past few weeks, but by a chicken. And I know that normally we're video bombed by a chicken on my grill, but actually I realized this morning that our neighbor right behind us has a chicken roaming around. I think that's a new thing. And I heard this chicken this morning, and I'm a bit scared that the chicken might make a lot of noise. So apologies in advance if we are video bombed by the chicken. It kind of reminds me of one of my favorite movies, Jewish themed movies, The Frisco Kid with Gene Wilder and Harrison Ford. And there's it's about a rabbi that's traveling with like an outlaw in the Wild West, if you know that movie. And one of my favorite scenes is when the rabbi is going after a chicken and he's going, "Here, chicky, 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 here, chicky, chicky, chicky. I don't want to hurt you, I only want to eat you." That's kind of my views on chickens. By the way, I know at least one of my viewers here is vegetarian. Sorry, not sorry. Arya's watching. Speak of the devil. Arya is a vegetarian when it suits him. Hi Arya, don't bomb me today, please. I got too much to talk about. Okay, first of all, I'll start with the positive and then I'll rant. The positive is, if you haven't seen it already, I streamed last night on this page, the Israeli Cool page, as well as the Israeli Cool YouTube channel, an amazing interview I did with my friend Thani Al-Shirari. Hi Thani, if you're watching this. If not, I'll send you a link to this so you will watch it. He's a friend of mine from the United Arab Emirates, and we had a great discussion on Israel and attitudes and how he was brought up, and he's just a real mensch, and you really need to see this interview. And my mum, who might be watching this as well, says you need to watch it as well. She loved it. So if my mum says it was a good interview, then it's a good interview. Okay, I trust my mum. Okay, that's the positive part. And now I want to talk about a thorny topic. Okay, so you probably, if the people watching this now, you either watch me regularly and you know my views, or you read my website and watch my videos, or maybe one of you who does that will share it to someone who's not so familiar with me and my views and my website and what I write. So it's more for, I guess, the second category, although those of you who are regulars will get something out of my rant today. And that is, what is Zionism? And the reason I want to talk about Zionism, the word Zionism, is we had a number of different, of course you have the Black Lives Matter. I've been mentioning the protests for, a number of weeks now. But we had, like in the last week or so in New York City, there was a protest rally, whatever you want to call it, by a group, and Linda Sarsour's Empower group endorsed it. And basically it said no cops or Zionists allowed. Okay? Let's put that aside for a second. But then this morning I found out and wrote about a Toronto-based restaurant and catering service called Food Benders, that they also said no Zionists allowed, and they also said F the cops. So a very similar kind of theme there. Very kind of casual in its message. And I'm not saying, of course you have the people who are pro-Israel and the regular people that are obviously absolutely disgusted by this. But I'm not seeing a lot of the wokesters out there, which, by the way, I have some Facebook friends who I would consider wokesters, who are very much, let's say, talking about and, talkative about Black Lives Matter. But when they see, and I assume you can't avoid it, you have someone like Ice Cube saying things like this. He also calls us fake Jews. That's another story. But I'm not seeing any of those people condemning that. And, you might think that, you shouldn't talk about it because Jews have white privilege or something. But, like, I'm going to call you out on this, and I might revisit that a bit, towards the end of this talk. But, I see you. I see your posts on my Facebook feed. It's all about Black Lives Matter, and I'm all for that in terms of, as a catch cry, in terms of ending discrimination and police brutality against my black brothers and sisters. But if you're going to avoid the anti-Semitism, which is rearing its ugly head, by the way, we're not injecting, I mentioned this a week or two ago, that we're not injecting ourselves into this, trying to hijack the cause. That would be the Palestinian Arabs who are hijacking the cause, successfully, might I add. We don't ask for you guys to bring this up, but it's been brought up, and then you need to talk. If you're really anti-racist, then talk about it. Okay, don't be virtue signalers, because I kind of think you're virtue signalers. I'm not going to mention names, but you're on my Facebook feed. Let's leave it at that. Okay, so you have these two news stories, okay? Zionists not allowed. So I think I need to talk a bit about the word Zionism. Many of you will know what that means, but some of you will not. So all Zionism is, I know it's used as a pejorative, but all Zionism is basically is support for Jewish aspirations for self-determination in the historical homeland. That is it. That is all Zionism is. Okay, let's break that down. Jewish support, okay, Jewish aspirations, we'll get to that, in the historical homeland. Now that's not my subjective view, that's historical fact. As Ben Shapiro has said, and it's gone around the world a few times, facts don't care about your feelings. Now, I'll leave religion out of it for a second. I'm obviously a Torah observant Jew, but not all of you are even religious Christians or Muslims. Okay, so I'll leave religion out of it for a second. But if you just look at history, it's a fact that we were here before any other living, race or nation. Okay, obviously there were Canaanites and Jebusites and all these people that God told us to take the land from at the time. None of them exist anymore. Now, the Palestinian Arabs, the people that identify as Palestinians, I call them Palestinian Arabs because actually, if you look at the old history books and the articles, the people that were called Palestinians even before, pre-1948 were Jews, okay? And I've written about that in length. Look at my website under the history tab. It's all there, even from the New York Times, when the New York Times actually was reporting the truth, okay? So that's just history. And again, I encourage everyone to just look at it. Don't take my word for it. I'm just some schmo in front of a grill. I'm a schmo in front of a grill, but I grill really well, by the way, just so you know. Okay, but I encourage everyone to, you all have access to the things I have access to. Just do your research, okay? That's all it is. And this I'm just talking about history. So we were here before these Palestinian Arabs. As I've mentioned in the previous talk, my ancestors were from the tribe of Levi. Okay, that's not just something, my father was not a religious guy. He was not observant. I became observant when I was about 19. But he told me, I know I'm from the tribe of Levi because he told me that. That came with him, a secular Jewish person that had no, kind of, let's say, ulterior motive. That was passed down to him. So we were definitely here first. That's just history. Now, the Palestinian Arabs, the earliest ones will come from the 7th century Islamic conquest of the area. But I'm not saying even that's most of them, because many of them actually came, now hear me out here, and this is also, you can look at the New York Times articles on my website. It's all from there. I deliberately use the New York Times, hoist them on their own petard. But there were people that came after let's say the early Jewish pioneers of the 20th century, the early 20th century, even a little bit before, late 19th century, came and they helped, drain the swamps, get rid of the mosquitoes and the malaria, and basically the whole area was prospering. So you had Arabs from surrounding countries coming because it was, good. Things were happening here. Industry was starting. We were hiring, the Jewish pioneers were even hiring Arab laborers and joining forces with them. I've written about this as well. So some people came then. But here's another thing that I actually wrote on my blog this week, and that BLM doesn't really mention when they start talking about Zionists and talking against us, is that there are these Afro-Palestinians. These are Africans that were slaves that were brought into the area. This is a fact. Reuters have even written about this. It's all on my website. Okay, and nothing that I'm saying now cannot be actually verified 100%. So the BLM aren't talking about that. So you've got all this hodgepodge of Arabs that came here, the earliest being from, as I mentioned, the 7th century, which is way after we were here. Now, even though many of us came after the diaspora, after we were in exile, we came back. Okay, whatever you think about that, we have historical roots in this homeland, which are at least but I say more legitimate than those that say that they identify as Palestinian Arabs. Okay, so that's just history. If you don't like it, ignore history, and we see many people ignoring history these days. So that's what Zionism is. If you support Jewish aspirations for self-determination in their historical homeland. So if you have a problem with that, then you probably have a problem with Jews. Wait a minute. Oh, by the way, before I get to that, so you have no Zionists allowed, like in this protest and also this restaurant. But another way to look at it, if you want to kind of understand the gravity of the situation and the racism and bigotry involved in that, which, many wokesters out there don't really feel the need to talk about. By the way, many anti-racist campaigners or people that think they're anti-racist are the ones perpetuating this no Zionists allowed trope. I mean, it's just so, how do I say it? We say hafuch al hafuch in Hebrew. It's just so anti everything right. Let's put it that way. Okay, so, and by the way, I keep losing my train of thought because I've got just so much on my mind right now, and it's really hard to kind of keep track. So, as I'm saying, like an analogy. So just say you have a restaurant. It doesn't have to be a Jewish or kosher restaurant, but just say you have a restaurant, and it says no Native Americans allowed. Okay, now I assume that all Native Americans, right, they believe this is their homeland, that the United States of America, they were there first. And that's not it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to just say the United States of America is illegitimate and they want to, have an insurrection. We'll leave that to the Antifa and the far right. But if you were to have a restaurant that said no Native Americans allowed, or no Native Americans that believe that they have legitimate claims to this land allowed, you'd be called a bigot. No question, you'd be called a bigot. I can even go further and say if you had a restaurant that said no Palestinians, I assume that the majority of Palestinian Arabs believe that they have rights to this land, okay? I'm not going to go into I have gone a bit into how legitimate that is, but they believe that, and I'm not going to take that away from them. 1 second, let me just have a beer, a bit of a sip, because I'm just getting started. Okay, so if you had a restaurant that said no Palestinians that believe that they have rights in what they call Palestine are allowed, that's also, you'd rightly think that's bigotry. No Jewish restaurants are doing that, by the way. It's only coming from these anti-racists that think Zionism, they can use this word Zionism as an insult, but I'm trying to demystify today what that term Zionism is. Okay, you have to understand that all it is saying that it's supporting Jewish aspirations for the historical homeland. Now, Zionists come in all shapes and sizes and actually colors. Okay, so you have people, all sides of the political spectrum. You have people more on the right who are Zionists, and they believe that they're on the very right. They might believe that no Palestinian Arabs should be allowed here. That's a minority. Most Zionists that I know want to live in peace and security with our Arab brothers and sisters here in the land. But they don't want them to, let's say, either with a demographic destruction or physical destruction of our people. Okay, and unfortunately many of the Palestinian Arabs do want us out of here. They're not willing to live with us. I mean, you see the Israeli Arabs, right? They're more or less willing to live with us here. And the people that still identify as Palestinian Arabs, many of them don't. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That means no Jews. From the river to the sea, it's the whole land. It's 1948, modern state of Israel. It's not 1967 disputed territories. Okay? All this stuff, these are just sort of the catchphrases that many of you, or some of you at least, might not know the meaning of, but they have a very particular meaning to those of us paying attention. And you have to understand this, why it's so offensive. So when you say no Zionist allowed, you're basically precluding people that believe that Jews should be able to live in the historical homeland. Again, that can include people on the left, so-called liberal Zionists. Now, last week I spoke about anti-Semitism and diluting that term, okay? Because you had a blogger on the Elder of Zion blog talk about people like Natalie Portman and who else? Jennifer Aniston, they'd done certain things or said certain things or, retweeted certain things, posted certain things. But if you take, for instance, Natalie Portman, as I mentioned, and I'm not a fan of hers by any stretch of the imagination, but she's a Zionist and she's been attacked as a Zionist. Now, her conception of what a Zionist is very different to mine. Okay, but does she believe that Jews should be able to live here and that this is our homeland? I would venture to say yes. She's not an anti-Semite, of course not. That's just ludicrous and ridiculous. Okay, but many of these people that say no Zionists allowed, right? They say they're anti-racist and they pretend to be peace campaigners. But you have people in the peace camp, okay? Again, I don't necessarily agree with them and their tactics and what they believe, but some of them are actually Zionists. They're not saying that the state of Israel is illegitimate. Some of them are, the far left, okay? They're not Zionists. But so when you say no Zionists allowed, what you have to understand is that about 95% of world Jewry are Zionists, okay? You have to understand this. Now, yeah, roughly 90, I would say 95, maybe even more. Now, these so-called anti-racists, these people that say no Zionists allowed, they're anti-Semites, okay? I'm going to say that now. They're Jew haters. They might not even understand. In some cases, they deny it and they actually don't believe they are, but they are bigoted against Jews for all the reasons I've just explained. Now, Zionism, okay, hear me out. Zionism is an integral part of Judaism. Okay, let me give you some examples. In the prayer book, we're always talking about Israel. We're praying towards Israel. We face the direction of the old city of Jerusalem. Let's take Passover. It's funny because you have like groups, anti-Zionist groups, like If Not Now, anti-Israel groups that have these liberation seders. So they co-opt, for instance, Passover, they co-opt Chanukah. Passover, right, we say L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. It's one of the most Zionist things ever because it talks about us being taken out of the land of Egypt. Why did God take us out of the land of Egypt? To give us the Torah and then to move us to the promised land, which is Israel. Okay? So for them to co-opt that is ridiculous. They also co-opt Chanukah. Chanukah is how we rededicated the temple in Jerusalem, the temple where the mosques now lie, that these wokesters and anti-Israel people support. And by the way, I'm not saying we have to demolish the mosques and put the temple. I think history will just play out the way it will, and I have confidence that the temple will be rebuilt one day. But what I'm saying is it's just ridiculous. They don't, like, Zionism is an integral part of Judaism. Now, some of these anti-Israel Jews, like let's take the Neturei Karta, that these anti-Semites love to show, hey, we don't hate Jews. You've got these people, they look really religious. They're the Neturei Karta. Look it up. They're what, 0.001% of world Jewry, something like that. They're in the hundreds. You've got the Satmar. I mean, let's just say at the maximum you might have 1,000 or 2,000 of these really anti-Zionist Jews that these anti-Semites say, hey, some of my best friends are Jewish. So I'm just wondering, when they get married, do they, all Jewish marriages have that part where you smash your foot on the glass to remember the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem? So even they're acknowledging Jewish history, and that is, how we should be living in the land of Israel. Now, these Neturei Karta, Satmar, and these anti-Israel nutbags, they don't believe, and hear me out, wokesters and anti-Semites, you think they're your friends, but it's just a matter of timing. I mean, they're disgusting and vile, right? I hate their views, but they still believe we're going to end up here, just so you know. They believe that the Messiah has to come first before we can settle here. It's just a timing issue. Okay, so just so you know, you're using them, but they're also using you, just so you know. Okay, so that's what I had to say. Okay, so if you're anti-Zionist, you are a Jew hater. If you criticize Israel like you'd criticize any other country, so you criticize some Israeli policies, whether I like it or not, I don't have to agree with you, you're not necessarily a Jew hater. You might just be criticizing certain policies. But it also depends on the context, because just say you're only criticizing Israeli policies and you're not Jewish, and it's not in the context of a certain discussion, but you're just always focusing on the Jewish state and criticizing policies. So maybe you're a Jew hater, but you're just a little bit more sophisticated than some of your other Jew hating brethren. Okay, so That's what I had to say today. Hope I articulate myself well enough, but I'm just so sick of the word Zionist being used in an insulting way, and many people out there just not thinking twice about it. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Understand what Zionism means. Again, Zionism is support for Jewish self-determination in their historical homeland. We have history on our side, okay? And if you want to argue with me about it, then you sure as hell better bring proofs, okay? This isn't just subjective opinion right now. Whew. Okay, I'm glad I got through that, more or less unscathed. We didn't have any photo bombing or video bombing by any chickens, except for the ones on my grill. Again, sorry to the vegetarians, sorry not sorry. Have a great Shabbos, everyone. Take care. Make sure that you see my interview with my friend from the United Arab Emirates, Dani Al-Sharari. Shabbat Shalom. Have a great weekend, everyone.